Derek Leeds got off of work at around 5:30 p.m. It had been a busy day at the office, and he was relieved to be heading home for the day. Meeting with people all day and talking about what to do when they die isn't exactly for the faint-hearted, but he knew what he was getting into once he became a life insurance agent. Derek had prepared himself for the doom and gloom, and found that making plans for when people kicked the bucket was a lucrative business. He didn't mean to be crass, but that's what he sincerely thought. People dying is good business for those who decided what to do for them once they entered the great beyond. Derek exited via the side entrance of the Continental Life Trust building, waving goodbye to a fellow co-worker as he spotted him making his way to his shiny Prius. Digging around in his pocket for his keys as he neared his car, Derek caught a glimpse of a man dressed up as Beetlejuice walking into the Safeway across the street. Derek shook his head. He had almost forgotten it was Halloween. Derek Leeds hated Halloween. I mean, sure, he enjoyed it as a kid, but now the man despised the wretched day. As he got older, Derek found that the day brought unnecessary trouble that well outweighed the positives of a night filled for fun and geared towards children dressing up and running amok in their search for candy. Vandalism, dangerous pranks, and even serious crime had become part of the Halloween tradition, and he could not understand why people even attempted to defend this so-called holiday. He sighed and unlocked the car door, throwing his briefcase into the back seat. As he adjusted his mirror, Derek was surprised to see that a hearse had pulled up behind him. Making sure he wasn't seeing things and the hearse wasn't just a twisted figment of his imagination, Derek turned around in his seat to look at it. It was there all right, and it slowly inched its way closer to his bumper. It honked twice, as if letting him know that it wanted him to make haste and leave already. Derek shook his head in frustration and honked back, letting the driver of the hearse know he wasn't a person one could push around. After a few moments, the hearse backed up and drove past space. Derek watched as it trudged its way out of the parking lot and then down the bustling street. "That was weird," he said aloud, shaking his head once more. He figured maybe the driver of the hearse was some moron who had rented it for Halloween, not an actual mortuary worker, and he tried to give him a scare. Whatever the heck that was, it was unnerving at the least. He pulled out of his parking space and drove out of the lot. As Derek made his way past Safeway, he spotted the Beetlejuice guy again. He seemed to sense Derek looking at him, and gave the insurance agent a cold stare as he walked down the sidewalk. Derek quickly looked away and cursed himself when he arrived at a red light. Derek looked to his right, and sure enough, Beetlejuice stood there watching him. He never seemed to blink as he stared directly at Derek, not moving a muscle as he waited to cross the street. Pretending to be oblivious to his creepy demeanor, Derek focused on the road ahead. When the light was green, he was relieved to drive away from the costume freak. "I hate Halloween," he thought. When Derek arrived at the apartment complex where he lived, he could see that the Halloween festivities would begin early for him this year. A group of kids dressed up as a variety of characters are playing from the complex, chasing one another and talking excitedly. Derek parked in the carport and made his way towards them. A little girl dressed up as Jessie from Toy Story gave him a big smile. "Happy Halloween!" she shrieked. Derek gave her a smile in return, even though that greeting made him cringe a little. "Yeah, same to you, kid." He walked past her and her noisy friends and made his way up the stairs to his unit. As he entered his apartment, he loosened his tie and sat on the sofa. As Derek listened to the sound of the children's laughter getting louder by the minute, he turned on the television in hopes of stifling some of the noise and rested his head. As he watched an aging weatherman forecast an evening of foggy skies with a very slight chance of rain, Derek suddenly heard a knock at his door. He turned his head and groaned. "Who is it?" he called out. As expected, no response. "Must be an early bird trick-or-treater," he thought to himself. He got up and went to the door to let them know he didn't have any candy whatsoever. Derek opened the door expecting to see a kid dressed up in a silly costume waiting anxiously for a chocolate bar, but was surprised to find nobody was there. As he looked around, something at his feet caught his eye, and he found that a black business card was on his doormat. He picked it up and was startled to read his own name, typed in dark red lettering. Bewildered, he flipped the card over and found that a simple message in the same format was on the other side. It read, "You have an appointment. He stepped further outside and looked around for any sign of anybody that could have left a strange card. Nobody was in sight. Clearly thinking this was some kind of stupid joke by somebody he knew from work that took the time to try and mess with him, Derek called out to them. "If this is your idea of scaring someone, I'd try a little harder next time. Get a life." With that, he returned inside and slammed the door. Derek sat on the sofa again and looked at the odd card. He placed it down on the coffee table without another thought and continued watching the news. Nice try. Later that night, as he ate a Hungry Man TV dinner and watched a movie, Derek began to hear the sounds of Halloween outside. He could hear his neighbors answering their doors and passing out candy to trick-or-treaters as children squealed in delight and screamed incessantly. He took a bite of mashed potatoes when his telephone suddenly rang. He picked up the receiver and quickly swallowed his food. "Hello?" After a few seconds of silence, he was about to hang up when he heard a woman's voice. "Is this Derek Leeds?" "Yeah, that's me. May I ask who's calling?" Again, a few moments of silence went by until he heard the female voice on the other end. "You have an appointment, Derek Leeds." Realizing this was the same person who left him the weird card, he sighed angrily. "Okay, just who in the hell is this?" There was no response, but he heard the woman hang up. He set the receiver down and shook his head. Suddenly, his doorbell rang. Derek jumped a little and faced the front door. He could hear someone moving around on the other side. He got up off the couch and looked at the peephole. Nobody was there. This is all some sick Halloween joke, he thought. As he chuckled to himself, realizing that someone was clearly trying to screw with his head, he felt somebody tap his shoulder. Immediately, Derek felt a strong icy chill enter his body, and he stood there as rigid as a statue, terrified to turn around. As he thought of what kind of maniac looking to either rob or murder him was now in his apartment, he heard them laugh. It was a woman. He raised his arms into the air in surrender. "Please, I don't want any trouble. Just tell me what you want." The next thing he knew, Derek felt his body twist around, and he was forced up against the door. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips as he stared at the woman. She wore a dark, tattered gown, her eyes as white as snow, and her face paler than any face he had seen before. Her long, wavy dark hair flowed down past her bosom and seemed to float as if she stood under water. As she held him firmly with gloved hands, he could see, in fact, that she was also not standing, but was levitating inches above the carpet. Her eyes seemed to hold Derek in place with such an ethereal force he could not move a single muscle. Finally, the woman spoke. "You have an appointment, Derek Leeds. You cannot be late. You will be late if you do not go now," she said in a low voice. Her words chilled him to the bone, and he tried to look away from her ghostly gaze. I don't know what you mean. Please, leave me alone," he cried. She moved closer to his face. "He is waiting for you, Derek. You must leave now. It is unavoidable." He could feel her watching him, waiting for his response. Derek could feel his heart thundering in his chest. Every time she slowly exhaled, it felt as if his body felt a blast of Arctic air penetrate his flesh and bone, causing his legs to shake uncontrollably. He looked upon the specter's horrifying face and came to realize that he truly just had to do what she wanted. He had to go wherever she wanted him to. I'm sorry. I remember now. I have that appointment. Where do you want me to go?" he asked. She looked at Derek for the longest time before giving him a small smile. "To your appointment." Before his very eyes, she suddenly vanished. Just like that. He fell back against the door, trembling all over with his hand over his mouth. Derek felt like he was going to be sick. He sprang to the coffee table and picked up his car keys. He nearly tripped over himself as the frightened life insurance agent flew through the door. As he bolted down the stairs and ran to the carport, Derek noticed the odd hearse from early in the day parked across the street from his apartment complex. He couldn't see the driver, but the headlights were on, and Derek could hear the slow, rumbling hum of its engine. That damn hearse again, he thought. Derek quickly unlocked the door to his car and jumped in. I have to get away from here. He was in fear of his life, and all these ominous signs point to a dark revelation he dare not face. Not tonight, he thought. As Derek backed out of the carport, a neighbor of his with his young son tried to say hello, but he blatantly ignored their friendly waves and kept his eyes focused on the hearse, apparently waiting for him. He inched out of the carport and onto the street slowly, watching the hearse. He switched on his high beams and attempted to flood the ghastly vehicle with light in hopes of seeing just who in the world was driving that thing. Trying to see the face behind the wheel of the creepy hearse to his right, Derek wasn't paying attention to his left, and his car was suddenly pulverized by a large red Ford pickup truck charging down the road. Upon impact, Derek smashed his head into the driver's side window, shards of glass severely lacerating his face. As he felt the warmth of his blood trickle down his neck, his car spun 360 degrees, and his neck snapped back as the vehicle collided with the nearby telephone pole, wrapping metal around the pole, sending metal debris flying through the air. As Derek lay there unable to move, stuck in his seat, unbearable pain coursing through his body, he could see through the dark smoke cloud emanating from under the car's hood, the ominous hearse slowly drive by his wrecked vehicle. It suddenly stopped, and a hooded, ghostly figure came out of the transporter. As he felt his life being drained away, in his last moments Derek saw the hooded figure be approached by an almost translucent man in white, who, for just a moment, turned back to look at the smoldering heap of metal he once sat in. At the same time, Derek felt the presence of the ghostly woman from earlier. She crouched next to the wreckage and smiled as she watched Derek die. Right on time, she whispered.